Hilchos Eiruvin Perek Chamishi, the laws of Eiruvin, chapter 5. Today, the topic is Shituf Mivoot. Similar idea to what we've been talking about until now, the Eiruv Shacharis, the fact that members of a courtyard join together with food to allow them all to carry in the courtyard. The same applies on the larger scale. When you have a number of courtyards that open into an alleyway, into a mavoi, they all need to make, if they want to carry in the alleyway, they all need to make a shituf, a type of partnership where they also join through food and declare that we all have equal ownership in all the courtyards, and so too in the alleyway, and that allows everybody to carry wherever they want. There were some different parameters, as we saw. Eiruv Shacharis has to be done with bread. The Shituf can be done with other foods. And today we're going to learn a whole host of other laws that are related to the Shituf, specifically the process of a number of courtyards joining to make an Eiruv in a shared alleyway. And also at the end, we're going to get a little bit about the even bigger scenario, which we also mentioned in chapter 1, when an entire city wants to come together. All the alleyways want to connect to one big city and to be able to carry in the streets of the city, assuming the city is closed off on all four sides. So, let's get to it. Halacha Aleph. Anshe mavoi shahaya b'neyan shituf b'maychal echad le'inyan schayra. If members of different courtyards that opened into an alleyway had partnership with a type of food with regards to business, in other words, they did not join together in this food with the express intent of using it for a shituf, for partnership for Shabbos. But everybody was chipping in for an investment in some wheat, let's say. Everybody bought some wine in partnership, or some oil, or some honey, or anything like it. They don't require another partnership of food with regards to Shabbos laws. They can rely on the partnership that they have through this merchandise. That's provided that it's only one type of produce that everybody's partnered in, and it's all to be found in one vessel, in one massive container. But if different courtyards were partners in different things, two courtyards are partners in oil, two courtyards are partners in wine. Everybody's partners, but in different stuff. Where it was all a wine partnership, but they were in 2 containers, 3 containers, multiple containers. That doesn't consider to join them with regards to Shabbos. They all have to be joined in one vessel with one type of food. And so they have to make another shituf to be able to carry in the alleyway. If a member of the alleyway, in other words, one of the people in one courtyard goes to another guy in another courtyard and asks him for some wine or some oil before Shabbos, and as the commentary has explained it here, we're talking about the shituf food. So they've already partnered for Shabbos. Everybody joined together with one container of wine, one container of oil, and now some guy in the courtyard wants to actually access the wine or oil. And the guy in the other courtyard who's hosting the shituf says, "No, I don't want to give you." Batel hashituf. That cancels the entire partnership. Because by saying no, you've just shown we're not partners. Partners are not particular with each other. Sure, you want to get some wine, take some oil. You're asking for the wine or oil, you're not getting it, you're not a real partner. If there's a member of a certain alleyway, let's say one courtyard, who typically always takes part in the shituf. Everybody knows this courtyard, they're always eager to be a part of the sharing. And this time, let's say it was the appointed day to make the shituf. Some people do it, once a year, let's say, and no go. But not no go because he doesn't say. They just didn't take part. The rest of the members of the courtyard can go into his home and take forcibly part of the food that's needed for the shituf. But if there's a member in the alleyway who actively doesn't want to, not he just didn't do it technically, or usually he does it. No, he doesn't want anything to do with his neighbors, with his alleyway neighbors. We force him also to take part. You can't just be the one sore guy who stops everybody else from being able to carry. You must join. If one of the members of the alleyway had a storage room full of wine or oil or something like that, so instead of everybody bringing a bit of their own wine or their own oil, this guy can say, I'm doing everyone a favor. I'm going to grant everybody a portion in my storage room. Every courtyard participating gets part of my wine. And by virtue of that, he can make the Eiruv on their behalf. Even if you don't actually separate it, this is for courtyard A, this is for courtyard B, etc. You just said everybody has a part in my storeroom. And it's now sitting all mixed up in the storage house. It counts for a partnership because you've actively declared that they have a part in your stuff. Everybody's partners in the wine, even if they can't point to their part. If you have a courtyard which has two openings to two different alleyways, you see it over here in the picture. The middle courtyard shares an alleyway with the top courtyard and with the bottom courtyard. If it only joined one shituf, let's say the middle courtyard joined with the top one, and they made a shituf over their alleyway. Now the middle courtyard cannot carry in the other lane, in the other alley. And people cannot carry out or in things from there. Therefore, therefore, a very interesting rule emerges. We had before that if you know or if you think that somebody wants to be a part of the Eiruv, you can bring food for them and acquire it on their behalf without even telling them. Because of the principle of Zachin la'adam shalei b'fanav. We grant people benefit even if they don't consent or even if they're not there. But here, let's say somebody in the middle courtyard is now collecting food from everybody else in the middle courtyard to join the shituf for the top alleyway. It's not just granting them benefits. You're also granting them liabilities because now they can no longer carry in the bottom courtyard if they join this one. Others explain it a bit differently. If they join this one, they won't be able to move stuff around in the alleyway. But the point is, besides for the benefit, there's also a liability. And when there's also a liability, now you got to let them know. Therefore, if one guy is acquiring the shituf for everybody in the alleyway and making the shituf on their behalf, you have to let them know, the members of this courtyard, because they can only participate with their consent. It isn't necessarily a benefit for them. Maybe they want to be partners in the second lane, not in this one. By you doing it on their behalf in that one, you're giving them benefit here, but liability there. You got to let them know. Halacha hey. A person's wife can be part of an Eiruv on behalf of her husband without his knowledge. That's provided, though, that the husband isn't intending to forbid all his neighbors from carrying. And we'll soon see what that means. But if he's intending to forbid everybody from carrying, she cannot enter an Eiruv or a Shituf on his behalf unless he consents. What does that mean? That this guy intends to forbid everybody. That means he expressly stated, he verbalized his intention. He has already said, I don't want to be part of an Eiruv, I don't want to be part of a Shituf. If he verbalized that, then his wife can't go in there on his account without letting him know. But if he just didn't say anything, she can enter the deal on his behalf. Let's go with the case over here. People of the middle courtyard made a shituf with one of the courtyards. To the top one, to the bottom one. If it was one type of produce which was used in the shituf, everybody gave, let's say, wine or oil. Even once the food runs out, the guy in charge of the shituf can make another one, collect wine again, and this time he doesn't have to let them know. He can acquire it on their behalf. No need to notify them a second time. But if the shituf was created out of two types of food, and the food level went down, he can add to the amount of food, the guy in charge of the shituf, without letting them know. But if the food runs out, you can do it on their account, but you have to let them know. Because we have two different types of food, now we don't know, do they want to re-enter the deal, do they not? You got to ask them. If there was a middle courtyard that was already engaged in a shituf with one of the courtyards, let's say with the top one, and then new people move into the middle courtyard, they don't have to be told that they're under terms of a shituf with a specific courtyard. I'm sorry, they do have to be told. You can acquire on their behalf, and you must let them know. Because they're new people. You don't know whether they want to be part of the Eiruv with this alleyway, maybe they want to go with the other alleyway. So therefore you have to let them know. You can't just do it on their behalf without telling them. A generous courtyard. They went with both. They did a shituf with the top courtyard, with the bottom courtyard. The courtyards can open to the middle courtyard can go to any alleyway. Any alleyway can go to the middle courtyard. But the two alleyways cannot carry with each other. If the middle courtyard was stubborn, didn't do an Eiruvin with any of them, then it forbids the usage of the alleyways on both other courtyards because it didn't make an Eruv. Same case. Middle courtyard opens to two lanes. But this time, there's one of them that it uses regularly. The other one doesn't really use regularly. The opening to which it's usually going out will provide the prohibition. But the one that it doesn't usually go to, it doesn't forbid. Because we don't say that they're even a member there. Like everyone knows you don't even use that door. So the fact that you didn't join the Shituf doesn't make a problem. But if it did expressly go and join the Eiruv of the alleyway which it doesn't usually enter, by showing that, the other alleyway now can say, hey, you went with that side, that's where you are. We don't care that you didn't join our Shituf, we're going to carry in our lane. Let's say the middle courtyard used to always go to the top courtyard, to the top alleyway. The members of the top courtyard, they made their own Eiruv. And the middle courtyard did nothing. It didn't join their Eiruv, it didn't join the bottom person's Eiruv. And the bottom guys didn't do anything either. So again, to recap, top courtyard makes their own Eiruv. Bottom courtyard does not. Middle Eiruv chooses not to join either one. So the top guys will say, the top guys will say, hey, you know what? You two guys are in a group. Stay in your non-Eiruv world. We're going to still be able to carry to our alleyway. Since both courtyards didn't make an Eiruv, you push the two together, so that it shouldn't forbid the other guys who did make the Eiruv. In other words, remember, the alleyway is a shared space. So technically, if the two courtyards do not join, these guys at the top cannot carry into the alleyway. But because the top guys have a good claim and they can say, hey, you two are in cahoots. You guys are together because anyways, you both didn't make an Eiruv. So we're going to look at the top alleyway as belonging only to the top courtyard. And they can make use of it, and we'll say the middle courtyard just belongs to that one, and all the bottom stuff have no Eiruv, they can't carry anything. Halacha Yud. You have a courtyard, doesn't have two lanes. It opens up on one side to a lane, to an alleyway, and on the other side it opens up to an open space. More than 2 sa'ah. So even if it's closed, remember that in laws of Shabbat, even if it's closed, if it's more than 2 sa'ah, 50 by 100 amos, you can't carry there. Since you cannot carry from the courtyard to that open space, that means per force that the courtyard over here at the bottom is relying on the alleyway for its traversing, for where it's going to be walking. And therefore it forbids the rest of the courtyards from carrying that alleyway till it joins the Shituf. But if the open space to which it opens to on the back is less than 2 sa'ah, so technically you could carry there, then the presence of the middle courtyard does not stop the top courtyard from carrying in the alleyway. Because we say the bottom courtyard is using its own entrance to the small enclosed area. Since it can use the entire enclosed area, why wouldn't it? And so it belongs to that, and the top alleyway belongs to the top courtyard. Kind of like the courtyard case, like we had yesterday. Same with the alleyway case. One member of an alleyway goes to spend Shabbos in a different alleyway. He does not forbid the rest of the members of the alleyway who did join in the Shituf from carrying in the alleyway. Or if one of the members in the alleyway stayed for Shabbos, but he built a clear demarcation line around his property, like a whole little ledge, 4 tfachim wide, by his entrance, he doesn't forbid the rest of the people from carrying in the alleyway. Because he separated himself from them, he divides his territory, and that's it. Nothing to do with you. He doesn't count as a presence here. People in the alleyway, only part of them joined the Shituf. The rest forgot and didn't do a Shituf. The same way when it comes to Eruv Chatzeres, one member in a courtyard can cancel, nullify the ownership of his possessions to the others. So too here, they can nullify the ownership of their authority, of their possessions, to the people who did take part in the Shituf. And with regards to nullifying their authority, their law is just like people in a courtyard, where one or two people forgot and didn't join the Eiruv. We've already said that every person with his household that relies on his table are considered to be one person, and that law applies both to Eiruv being made in a courtyard and to the Shituf being made among the members of an alleyway. You have an alleyway, multiple courtyards open to the alleyway. Each courtyard made its own Eiruv on its own to be able to carry in the courtyard. And then everybody joined a general, combined Shituf to carry in the alleyway. So in this case, if it turns out that one of the members of an individual courtyard had forgotten to take part in his individual Eiruv, he doesn't lose anything. Because in the end of the day, they all took part in the general Shituf, which combines them all. And anyways, we rely, bottom line, on that Shituf. We said the other day, the only reason when you have a Shituf, you still do the mini Eruv Chatzeres, so the kids don't forget about that concept. But they did. Everybody made the individual Eiruv. The fact that one guy forgot, he can rely on the bigger Shituf. But if after making the individual courtyard Eiruvs, they all join together in the general Shituf, and it turns out that one of the members didn't participate in the Shituf, then Asurim B'Mavai. They cannot carry in the alleyway. That ruins it for everybody. On each individual courtyard can carry in their own courtyard. That Eiruv still stands, but the larger Shituf does not. Because the relationship between an alleyway and the courtyards is the same relationship as the courtyards to the homes. The same way in the minuscule Eruv Chatzeres, if one guy were to forget, it ruins the Eiruv for the courtyard, unless of course he cancels his permission, his ownership, whatever. Same thing with the Shituf. If one guy doesn't participate, it ruins it for everybody. Halacha Yudalet. What if it was the opposite case? Not everybody was super frum, super religious. Everybody made their individual courtyard and then they made the larger Shituf. They only made the Shituf and they forgot to make the individual ones. They did a Shituf for the entire alleyway, but each individual courtyard forgot to make their own individual Eruv Chatzeres. If they are not stingy about their bread, they don't really mind eating with each other. We can rely on the larger Shituf and say that, you know what, you guys can all carry b'Shabbos harishona bildat, only for that first Shabbat. And it takes a lot of pressure for the rabbis to be allowed to permit the situation to you. And then as soon as Shabbos is over, you got to go back. Everyone's going to make an Eruv Chatzeres, and every individual courtyard has to do its own Eruv. Halacha Tezvav Mavoi Shalei Nishtatfu Boi. If you have an alleyway where the courtyards didn't join for the Shituf, im Eruv Chatzeres im Habatim, if the individual courtyards had made an Eruv with the homes, ein metaltalin by ela barba ames kekarmelis. They can carry in their own courtyards, but they cannot carry in the alleyway at all. It's treated like a karmelis, where they can only carry 4 amot. Since each individual courtyard made an Eiruv, the Eiruv in each individual courtyard converts each courtyard into one big home. And so it's as though homes are open right into an alleyway. And when homes open right into an alleyway, we don't carry there. You cannot carry in the entire space. But if people didn't join the Shituf and the individual courtyards also didn't do the Eiruv, we treat the entire alleyway like a regular courtyard who didn't have an Eiruv, and the same way when it comes to Shabbos. Any vessels that begin that begin Shabbos in the courtyard can be moved around in the entire courtyard. Any vessels that began Shabbos in the alleyway can be moved around in the entire alleyway. If there's an idol-worshipping Gentile or a Sadducee who is living in one of the courtyards open to the alleyway, his law with regards to the rest of the alleyway is the same as his law with regards to people in individual courtyards. when it comes to the idol-worshipping Gentile, you must rent his property from him or from one of the members of his household. In the case of the Sadducee, he has to nullify the ownership of his possession to them. But if it was just one idol-worshipping Gentile and one Jew, he does not need to have a shituf, because one-on-one is no problem. The law of one individual Jew or a multitude of Jews who are all eating at the same table and are treated like one Jew, din echadu, it's the same law. They're literally called one. So if it's a multitude of people who eat at the same table versus one Gentile, there's no problem. Halacha Yud Zayin. You have an idol-worshipping Gentile who lived in an alleyway. In other words, in one of the courtyards that opens to the alleyway. If he has his own private entrance in the back of his home, out to an open field, his presence does not forbid the rest of the people in the alleyway from carrying. Like the courtyard before that opens up to the open space, then you can walk there. Here too for the guy. Even if it's a tiny doorway, just 4x4 tfachim, even though he's making tons of use of the other doorway, he's bringing camels and wagons out the entrance of the regular entrance of the alleyway, but because he has a small little entrance of his own to the open space, he does not forbid the rest of the Jews from carrying in the alleyway. Because he only cares about the opening that's reserved for him, the one that goes to the open space. Same thing if it was open to an enclosed area. But the enclosed area was greater than 2 sa'ah, so it's treated like a public domain. It's the same law as though it were open to an open space, and his presence does not forbid the rest of the Jews from carrying in the alleyway. But if the enclosed area in the guy's backyard is less than 2 sa'ah, then he's not relying on that. So now he prohibits the rest of the Jews from carrying until they rent his property from him. Here's the next picture here. You have an alleyway. The courtyards on one side belong to idol-worshipping non-Jews. The courtyards on the other side belong to, Jews. And between the Jewish courtyards there were windows that were open. The Eiruvin kulan derech chalonos, and all of the Jewish courtyards joined together with an Eiruv by virtue of their windows. Even though for themselves they've become one entity and they can carry from one to the other through the windows, they cannot use the alleyway through their doorways until they rent from the non-Jew. What do you mean? We said before that when it's one Jew against one non-Jew, there's no problem. They can use the mavoi. So here, if all 3 Jews became one entity, why not? Says the Rambam, the mechanism of the Eiruv isn't that powerful in the presence of a non-Jew. When there's an idol-worshipping Gentile present, the fact that the Jews use the rabbinic mechanism to make themselves into one is not powerful enough to really convert them into one in that sense. Halacha Yutes. Now we move on from alleyways to the larger city Eiruv. You have a bunch of alleyways, a bunch of courtyards opening to a bunch of alleyways, opening to a bunch of streets, and the entire city is enclosed, and you want to make one big shituf to allow the entire city to be able to carry. Ketzad mishtatfin b'medina. What is the proper way to go about making a shituf in the big city? Kol chatzer v'chatzer ma'arevas la'atzma. First you begin with each individual courtyard making their own Eiruv chatzeris. Shalei l'shakeach hatineka, so the kids don't forget about that rule. And then everybody joins together for one big shituf, just like you would do for one big alleyway. But if the city was originally bought by one individual person, even if later it was divided up among many people as partners, they can all join in one shituf, and they can move around carry stuff around the entire city. Same if it belonged to a multitude of people. Then has only one doorway, as in this picture. They can all join into one shituf. As in this picture, if it belonged to the public and now there's 2 entrances, there's no one person who's the only stakeholder, it belongs to a multitude of people, and there's 2 openings of the city. People go in one and out the other. Even if it became owned by one person afterwards, you cannot make an Eiruv which will combine the entire city. What you have to do is what's called shiur. Basically, the rabbis were afraid that you don't want to make this massive city with 2 big openings look like one domain. So you have to show that there's one part that still cannot carry. You leave one place, afilu bayis echad b'chatzer achas, even one home in one courtyard, u'mishtatvin hashar, and the rest of the city joins the shituf. V'yiyu elu hamishtatvin kulon mutarin b'chol hamedina. Those that join the shituf can move around, carry stuff in the entire city. Chutz me'eisei makim sheshiru, besides for that place which they left over. V'yiyu oislan hanisharim mutarin b'mekayman b'shituf sha'istin la'atzman. And the people who were left out can carry in their place if they do a little mini shituf for themselves, but they don't join the citywide shituf. If there was enough people to make a shituf, they cannot move around in the entire rest of the city. Halacha chaf aleph, why do we do this? This we do as a symbolic act. So people should know that even though the city is wide open, 2 openings on each side, 2 openings, 1 on each side, and they're making an Eiruv, they should know that even though there's multiple people passing through the city, the Eiruv was the one that permitted them to carry. Look, how do we know it was the Eiruv that gave us that permission? Because those guys on the corner who didn't join the Eiruv, didn't join the Shituf, they're not carrying. Each one is on their own. That's going to cause people to remember, it was the Eiruv that allowed us to carry. It isn't like some Jewish law that you can carry in a city. There's a way to go about it. Look, those guys didn't take part and they didn't carry. And that's why the rabbis told you to do this shiur, this leaving over. Halacha chav beis medina shel rabim sheyesh la pesach echad besulam b'makom acher. What if there's a city that doesn't have 2 doors? One full doorway, another, at the other side there's a ladder to go out, not an actual doorway. Ma'arvin eskula, it's considered to have only 1 door, and you can make an Eiruvin in the whole city. Ve'ein tzricha shiur, without requiring those leftover places. She'ein asulam shabachayma chashuv kepesach. A ladder at the wall of a city isn't considered an opening. The homes that are left out of the Eiruv purposely, they can be used even if they don't open into the city. Their backs are to the city and their openings to the outside. Here you see it in the picture here. You leave out these 2 homes, their doorways go out of the city, their backs are not into the city. That's okay. You can make them be the left out ones and put an Eiruv for the rest of the city. If you're the one that's collecting on behalf of the entire city for the Shituf, if they're all joining in one Eiruv, you don't have to let them know. There's only benefits of carrying in the city. The law of somebody who forgets and doesn't join the Shituf of a citywide Eiruv, or somebody who goes to rest in a different city, or if there's an idol-worshipping Gentile living in the city, the law on the big city is the same as the small alleyway or the small courtyard. If every alleyway in a city joined the Shituf, with the exception of one, it forbids everybody else from carrying. But if those guys built a little ledge at the opening to their alleyway, and they said, we're out, we don't want to be part of the city, it doesn't forbid everybody else from joining the Shituf. Therefore, we don't do a half a city Eiruv. It's either all or every individual alleyway has to make their own Shituf. Because otherwise you can get into confusions, this Mavai is joining, that one is not. You either go on the Mavai level or on the city level. And then when you make a citywide Eiruv, if there are alleyways who don't want to join, let them build their own ledge of demarcation. They build a matzeva, a ledge by their opening, if they want to divide and go away from the citywide Eiruv, so it does not forbid the rest of the alleyways who do want to join the Shituf from carrying in the Shituf, and you end up with a proper citywide Eiruv, even with those individuals who do not want to take part.